Welcome back to another episode of Torque. So I know it's been a while since I posted a video. We've been working on my son's house. It was really time consuming doing a remodel. So I'm getting really close to getting back to posting videos and getting back to work on the Mustang. This episode is about removing and replacing the floor pan. We're doing it just on the passenger side. The video clips that I used were taken a while ago. They weren't my best work. I zoomed in a little bit too close, but you'll be able to see here in a minute. So let's head out to the barn and take a look. We are going to start on the passenger front pan and try and get this fitted in. You can see this whole section is missing. This actually has to tuck and go up underneath the inner rocker, and it doesn't actually have a flange. This one, this replacement, has a flange going up. If anything, you want it to go down, but I'm going to do it just like the factory did. I'm just going to have a flat surface on the bottom of the inner rocker. So you can see as you fit this piece in there, it's not cut out for the inner rocker at all. You can see this is sticking up really far. So I'm going to straighten out this flange. If I decide to make it roll down, it's still going to be there. So I'll have to probably cut here and then bend it down. And then I'm going to have to start notching off areas to try and get this whole pan to move out. So let's go ahead and start fitting this thing. Alright, so I straightened out this outer edge. This is sitting kind of crooked. You can see it's slipping underneath, which is what it's supposed to do. So now I'll start trimming back this area just a little bit at a time, just to contour around this inner rocker. And we'll try and see if we can't get this whole thing to kind of sit down a little bit. I'll have to put a lot of pressure on it and kind of screw it in place and mark the edges. Well, I've trimmed some more off the edge. It needs to go outboard some more. You can see my holes are off a little bit. It needs to go forward some, and then it needs to go outboard some more. But in order for me to go outboard, you remember when I straighten that edge, well, it's hitting on the bottom. So I'm going to take off a little bit, maybe about a ½ inch of this all the way down, and we'll just keep on slicing at it a little bit at a time. I think a ½ inch will get me here. I may have to form this a little bit to move it, to move the bend a little bit further aft. So let's go ahead and get that done. All right, so we've trimmed quite a bit off the seat pan just on the edge. I've got that lined up pretty decent. I also noticed that these holes are off a little bit, so I marked underneath. You can see the silver marker, and I'm gonna check that seat pan to see how it lines up. But otherwise, it's really close to the original. I want to make sure that this rear piece is going to match up, and then we'll start cutting and getting this piece fitted into place. So here's my marks from the new floor pan sitting on top. The thing I was worried about is that when the seat pan was put in place, that these holes will be off too much for you to get to the bolts for the seats to be mounted. But when I put this in place, I found that, and I don't think you can see that, but the seat, the hole is a little bit forward underneath, so my lines will line up pretty good. I think I'll be good for the new the floor pan being installed. So I started taking the plasma cutter and cutting out where the floor pan will be. Where the floor pan sat, which is high because it can't sit all the way down, that was that line. I added some area, and then I even added more. So that way when it sits down flush, I know I'll have plenty of room to actually scribe it. And I may just do an overlap on this. I may crimp the edges and do an overlap weld on this. So now I've already drilled out where the frame is down here. I'm starting to pull it up. I've got to get all the way up there. I'll get that removed, and then I'll show you guys when this is all removed. All right, so we have everything rough cut even up in front. So we're going to try and fit the panel, see where it lands, kind of mark again where it lands. Again, I'm going to try and do a flange on this, on most of it. I have done flange and butt on the Chevelle. Butt looks a lot nicer. The flange just gives it so much added strength. So we'll see when we get this fitted. All right, so now I'm fitting in the pan again. You can see if I put some pressure on it, it's already dropped down some from the line. I have to scribe another line on that, and that's going to be really close, and then I'll put an edge on that, something like 3/8 to a 1/2 inch, and then we'll put a flange on that. Up here, it has to drop down a little bit more, but we are getting really close. Front looks really good. Let's go ahead and get this cut again, and then we can flange everything. Okay, I went ahead and put the flange on there. I used a pneumatic flange tool. This thing works really good. You can adjust how much of a flange you want on there. So as long as I get the metal pushed right up against the flange, it's virtually a flat surface. So I do have some self-tapping screws to help draw everything down. At the very front, I went from a flange to a butt when you start getting into the engine compartment, and I should be able to match these up. It's just going to take a little dolly work. And then I'll have a repair piece just up here. So this made it a lot smaller. I know I'll end up using only a section of that piece, but it will match up perfect, and we'll get that put in a later time. Let me go ahead and show you. You can see where their flange is at. So you can see there's a little bit of a gap, 3/16 or so. I'll be able to weld that up, grind it down. It'll be flat, and then I can use a little bit of putty on this, and it'll look really good from the bottom. You can see right here, this is where I step from a flange to a butt. That's going to be at the very bottom. No one's going to ever notice that. So we're going to go ahead and pull this pan back out and prep it for welding. We'll do the subframe. We'll get some weld-through primer sprayed on. So we have the weld-through primer sprayed on there. So let's go ahead and weld this this floor pan in. We've got this front floor pan partially welded in. The area around the frame section, the subframe section, has been welded. I do have a little section to do right there. These are just tacked in place. I will fully weld down below. You can see where the flange is. And then I have the new section. Let me show you that. That's actually on the table. So it already has the punch outs for all the welds. You can see I've got it flanged as well. So it's going to be able to sit right in that pocket. So let's go ahead and get to welding, try and get this finished up, and then I can, of course, take care of that piece up front. I've got the floor pan all welded in. Most of my welds are about 3/8 of an inch long. I'll grind those down. I'll probably have some more welds to fill in once I grind down. I did get all the plug welds done there by the pinch weld at the bottom. So I'll go ahead and get this ground down, and I'll show you guys how it looks in the end. All right, so you can see it's fully ground down, both pans. Looks pretty good. I'm really happy with it. This is almost smooth. I could fill it in with some more welds, but why? I'm probably going to spray kind of like a truck bed liner on the bottom of it. It'll cover it up and smooth everything out. All right, so we're going to move on to the battery box. But before I can get to that, this radiator support actually welds onto that, and you can see there's some corrosion here. So I'm going to first hit these spot welds and try and loosen that piece of metal up. Cut this off. I'll make a new piece, section that in. Once I do that and I know that that's perfect, I'll go ahead and hit all the spot welds for the battery box and pull it off. Now before you do that, what I did is I actually made measurements going across to make sure this battery box lands in the exact location referencing the other fender, the fender support. And then I also referenced to make sure that the holes on top of this battery box sheet metal is actually going to line up in the same exact location so we can screw on or bolt onto our fender. So let's go ahead and start on this piece, and then we'll move on to the battery box. All right, so I've got the repair piece all cut out. and that fits about perfect. So I'm gonna go ahead and start drilling out all the holes for the battery box. I've already started. I'm gonna try and get that all drilled out. We'll replace the battery box, and then we'll mark the back side of this where the spot welds need to be. A few more spot welds and I'll have this this battery box out. Alright, so I marked the battery box on where the edge of the metal is going to be. So now I'm going to just punch some holes to do my spot welds, and then I can weld this up. Alright, so I got all my spot welds drilled out. I actually used one of the flange punch tools. It works pretty good, but I had to open it up. I opened it up to 5/16. I've got my weld through primer on, so let's screw this on and then get it all welded in. Alright, so we've got the battery box and our repair section all welded in, ground down. That actually came out pretty good. You can see that all ground down pretty good. I will tell you that this section, this battery box, was probably the easiest panel that I've had to replace so far. Fairly simple, most of it's spot welds, so it's no big deal. Just make sure you take measurements. You can see I took measurements, and that is 7 1/32 from this edge to that, another 25 3/16 from this edge to the edge of the radiator support. That will make sure that it's aligned perfectly. And then I did take measurements going across as well. You can see 46 3/16 goes from outside to outside, and 41 3/8 goes from the inside to inside. So definitely take those measurements. So with that, that pretty much wraps it up for this video. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something, and I hope to see you on another episode of Torqued.